In the summer of 1518, a plague descended upon the city of Strasbourg. It was not a sickness of the body, but of motion. It began with a single woman who stepped into a narrow street and began to dance. She did not stop for food or for rest. She simply danced. Within a month, hundreds had joined her, caught in an invisible, silent rhythm. They danced until their feet bled, until their bones broke, until their hearts gave out. This is the true and bizarre story of the dancing plague of 1518, a historical mystery that defies easy explanation. What drove an entire city to dance itself to death? Join us as we step into one of history's strangest events. To understand the dance, we must first understand the world that birthed it. The Strasbourg of 1518 was a city teetering on the edge, a series of brutal winters, late frosts, and wet summers had led to catastrophic crop failures. Famine stalked the land, and the price of grain had skyrocketed, leaving the poor to starve. Disease was a constant companion. Leprosy, smallpox, and a terrifying new affliction, syphilis, were rampant. Orphanages were overflowing. This widespread suffering created a climate of extreme psychological distress, a deep-seated fear and desperation that permeated every level of society. It was into this cauldron of anxiety that, in mid-July, a woman known as Frau Troffea stepped out of her home. For no apparent reason, she began to twist, twirl, and shimmy on the hot cobblestones. There was no music, only the unsettling sound of her shuffling feet and heavy breathing. Her husband and neighbors were baffled, then alarmed. Her dance was not a celebration. It was a compulsion. She continued for hours, collapsing from exhaustion at night, only to rise with the sun and begin her frantic movements anew, day after agonizing day, for nearly a week. By the end of the first week, the strange affliction began to spread. First one neighbor, then another, then a group of onlookers were suddenly seized by the same irresistible urge. They joined Frau Troffea in her silent, desperate dance. The bizarre personal tragedy was becoming a public spectacle, and a growing crisis that the city's leaders could no longer ignore. The panicked city council and the powerful guilds sought the advice of the city's most learned physicians. After observing the dancers, they excluded astrological or supernatural causes, instead diagnosing the affliction as a natural disease caused by hot blood. Their prescribed cure, based on classical medical theory, was not rest, but more dancing. They believed the afflicted must literally dance the fever out of their systems, day and night, until they were cured. To this end, the authorities made a disastrous decision. They would facilitate the dance. Guild halls were cleared, a large wooden stage was built, and professional musicians were hired to provide a constant beat. They even paid healthy dancers to join the throng to keep the afflicted moving. The city had, in effect, created a macabre, open-air dance club for the dying. The cure had the opposite effect. The public spectacle and the relentless music seemed to encourage even more people to join. The consequences were tragic. Without rest or sustenance, people began to die. Contemporary records, though likely exaggerated, report up to 15 deaths a day from heart attacks, strokes, and sheer physical exhaustion. The once baffling spectacle had turned into a terrifying and lethal epidemic. Faced with a mounting death toll and a cure that was only making things worse, the authorities and scholars of Strasbourg were forced to look for other, deeper causes for this madness. The search for an explanation, both then and now, leads us into the fascinating and often unsettling worlds of science, psychology, and faith. If this bizarre and tragic story has captured your imagination, I invite you to consider subscribing to the Dusty Codex. Your support is what makes these deep dives into history's strangest chapters possible. Before we explore the fascinating theories behind the plague, I'm curious, what is your initial gut reaction? Do you think the cause was physical, psychological, or something else entirely? Let me know in the quiet comments section below. One of the most prominent scientific theories is ergotism, a physical condition caused by ingesting grain, particularly rye, that has been contaminated with the ergot fungus. This fungus, Claviceps purpurea, contains potent psychoactive alkaloids that are chemically related to LSD, known in the Middle Ages as ST. Anthony's fire. Ergotism can cause convulsions, muscle spasms, hallucinations, and a sense of burning in the limbs. Many historians believe that dancing may have been the convulsive, twitching movements of mass poisoning. However, this theory is not a perfect fit. Ergotism often restricts blood flow, which would make sustained dancing for days on end nearly impossible. And it doesn't fully explain the seemingly coordinated nature of the phenomenon. The leading modern theory is mass psychogenic illness, or mass hysteria. The people of Strasbourg in 1518 were living under unimaginable stress. In their deeply superstitious world, the constant threats of famine, plague, and poverty were often interpreted as signs of divine wrath. The cult of Saint Vitus, who was believed to inflict dancing plagues as a curse, was particularly strong in the region. In this climate of extreme distress, it's believed a collective psychological breakdown occurred. The dancing began as an explosive release of pent-up trauma and anxiety. In a culture that believed the dancing curse was possible, the sight of others dancing could trigger the same symptoms in suggestible individuals, spreading the affliction through social contagion like a mental virus. Realizing their more dancing cure was a catastrophic failure, the city council reversed course completely, admitting a supernatural cause. They banned all music and public dancing. The remaining dancers, now considered penitents, were gathered up and taken not to hospitals, but on a forced pilgrimage to a shrine dedicated to Saint Vitus in the nearby town of Savon, to pray for absolution. Slowly, over the course of several weeks in late August and early September, the epidemic subsided. The dancing stopped as mysteriously as it had begun, leaving behind a traumatized city and a historical enigma. Whether it was the change in strategy, the psychological effect of the pilgrimage, or simply the exhaustion of the phenomenon, the silent, empty streets were a testament to one of the strangest and most tragic chapters in medieval history.